After my children put me in a nursing home, I purchased the facility and changed their visiting hours. They had no idea what was coming. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment where you're watching from. The journey I'm about to share changed not just my life, but the lives of everyone around me. I never thought my golden years would begin with betrayal. My name is Karen Mitchell, and at 73 I've seen my share of life's ups and downs. I've weathered the loss of my husband, raised 3 successful children single-handedly, and worked more jobs than I care to count. But nothing prepared me for that Tuesday morning in March when my children decided I was too much of a burden for their comfortable lives. I was in my garden, tending to the roses I'd been growing for over 30 years, when I heard the crunch of gravel in my driveway. My eldest daughter Hannah's silver BMW pulled up, followed by my son Daniel's pristine black truck. My heart swelled with joy. It was rare for both of them to visit at once. "Mom," Hannah called out, her voice carrying that artificially cheerful tone she used when she wanted something. "We need to talk." I wiped my hands on my gardening apron and smiled warmly. At 52, Hannah was a successful real estate attorney with 2 teenagers. Daniel, 48, ran a chain of auto repair shops across the state. Both of them had built their lives on the foundation of my sacrifices, something they seemed to have conveniently forgotten. We settled in my living room, the same room where I'd read them bedtime stories, helped with homework, and celebrated countless birthdays. The afternoon light streamed through the lace curtains I'd made myself, illuminating the family photos that covered every surface. "Mom," Hannah began, crossing her legs and smoothing her expensive suit. "We've been talking, and we think it's time we address your living situation." My stomach dropped, but I kept my expression neutral. "My living situation, I'm perfectly fine here, dear. This has been my home for 45 years. Daniel shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "That's just it. Mom, you're 73 now. What if something happens? What if you fall?" "We all live at least an hour away. More than that during rush hour," Hannah interjected, checking her smartwatch. "And we can't be constantly worried about you being alone." Daniel finished. I studied their faces. These children I had sacrificed everything for. Hannah, whom I'd supported through law school by working double shifts at the textile factory. Daniel, for whom I'd drained my savings to help start his first auto shop. I even remortgaged this house to help with Daniel's divorce settlement 5 years ago. "I see," I said quietly. "And what exactly are you suggesting?" Hannah exchanged a look with her brother before pulling out a glossy brochure. "We found this wonderful assisted living facility. Sunny Meadows. It's only 20 minutes from Hannah's house. And they have amazing amenities." She handed me the brochure, and I felt my hands tremble slightly as I looked at the images of smiling elderly people playing bingo and eating in a communal dining room. The words "Active Senior Living Community" were emblazoned across the front in cheerful yellow letters. "We've already toured it," Daniel added. "The staff is excellent, and you'd have your own apartment. Plus, there would be people your own age to socialize with." "People my own age," I repeated, feeling a bitter laugh rise in my throat. "Because the 3 of you are too busy with your own lives to visit your mother." Hannah's face flushed. "That's not fair. Mom, we visit when we can." "When was the last time?" I asked. "When was the last time any of you came here just to spend time with me? Not because you needed something or wanted to check some filial duty off your list." The silence stretched between us like a chasm. I could see them calculating, trying to remember, and failing. Daniel cleared his throat. "Look, Mom, we love you. That's why we want you somewhere safe. Somewhere where you'll be taken care of properly." "Properly," I echoed. "Because I haven't been taking care of myself properly for 7 decades. "That's not what we mean," Hannah said, her lawyer training kicking in. "We just think this would be better for everyone. You'd have activities, meals provided, medical care on site." "And what about this house?" I asked, gesturing around the room. "The house your father and I built together. The house where you all grew up." Daniel perked up at this. "Actually, that works out perfectly. Hannah could list it for sale. The market's really good right now. We could probably get a great price, and that money could help cover the costs of Sunny Meadows." I stared at him, unable to believe what I was hearing. They wanted to sell my home out from under me to pay for the prison they were sentencing me to. And I suppose you've already decided this, I said. All of you, without consulting me. Mom, please don't be dramatic, Hannah said. We're all adults here. We can discuss this rationally. Rationally, I repeated. Like how rationally you discussed it behind my back. The afternoon wore on, and their arguments became more insistent. They had already put a deposit down at Sunny Meadows. They had appointments scheduled for me to meet with the director next week. They had it all figured out, my entire future, without asking me what I wanted. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across my living room, I felt something inside me die. Not my love for them, that would take more than one afternoon to kill, but something else. My trust, perhaps. My faith in the children I had raised to be compassionate, thoughtful people. Fine, I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. If this is what you've decided, then I'll go. The relief on their faces was immediate and unmistakable. They had expected a fight, and instead, I had rolled over and accepted my fate. They didn't know that I had learned long ago to pick my battles carefully. Oh, Mom, you'll love it there, Daniel gushed. And we'll visit all the time. I smiled weakly, but I didn't believe him. They couldn't even visit me in the home I'd lived in for 45 years. What made them think they'd visit me in a nursing home over the next 2 weeks? My life was dismantled with ruthless efficiency. Hannah brought over a team of people who sorted through my belongings like vultures. This can come with you, they would say, holding up a single photo. This will have to go. They'd gesture at the piano I'd played every evening since my marriage. The bookshelf my husband had built by hand. The quilts I'd made for each of my grandchildren. I was allowed 2 suitcases and 3 boxes. 67 years of life, reduced to less than a van load. Daniel hired movers who showed no reverence for the memories attached to each piece of furniture. Hannah brought boxes and bubble wrap, systematically packing away my life while chattering about how excited she was for me to start this new chapter. I said very little during those 2 weeks. I watched. I nodded. I signed the papers they put in front of me. But inside, I was burning. With each photograph they discarded. With each heirloom they marked for donation. The fire inside me grew hotter. On the day they moved me to Sunny Meadows, I sat in the passenger seat of Hannah's BMW, watching my house disappear in the side mirror, the house where I'd brought both of them home from the hospital, the house where I'd nursed them through chickenpox and heartbreak, the house where I'd celebrated every milestone of their lives. Sunny Meadows was exactly as sterile and impersonal as I had imagined. The smell of industrial disinfectant mixed with overcooked vegetables hit me the moment we walked through the automatic doors. The walls were painted in what someone probably thought was a cheerful yellow, but it reminded me of bile. My apartment was a single room with a bathroom so small I could touch both walls with my arms outstretched. The window looked out onto a parking lot, not the garden I'd tended for 3 decades. The staff was polite but harried. They had 30 minutes to show me around the facility, explain the meal times, the medication schedule, the activities calendar. My children stood behind me, nodding along as if this was all perfectly normal. I think this is going to be wonderful for you, Mom, Hannah said, but she was already checking her phone. We'll let you get settled in. And then they left. Both of them, walking out of that sterile room without a backward glance. I heard their cars start in the parking lot below, listened to the sound of their engines growing fainter until there was only silence. I sat on the narrow bed they'd provided and allowed myself exactly 10 minutes to cry. 10 minutes to mourn the life I'd lost, the children who had abandoned me, the future I'd never imagined. Then I stood up, dried my eyes, and started planning. The first week at Sunny Meadows was a revelation, but not the kind my children had hoped for. I learned the routines quickly enough. Breakfast at 7, activities at 10, lunch at noon, more activities in the afternoon, dinner at 5:30, and then the long evening stretch until lights out. I also learned about my fellow residents. Margaret in the room next to mine had been put here by her daughters after she'd fallen in her shower. She hadn't seen them since the day they'd moved her in, and that was 3 months ago. Harold across the hall had been brought by his son who'd promised to visit every Sunday. That was 6 months ago. And every Sunday, Harold still sat by the front window waiting, The pattern was heartbreakingly consistent. Children who had decided their parents were burdens. Children who had convinced themselves that warehousing their elderly was somehow an act of love. During the day, I participated in the activities they offered, though my heart wasn't in them. Bingo on Mondays, crafts on Tuesdays, exercise class on Wednesdays that consisted mainly of seated stretches. The staff was kind enough, but I could see the exhaustion in their eyes. They were understaffed and overworked, trying their best to care for people who had become inconveniences to their own families. At night, I would lie in my narrow bed and think about the $7 million sitting in my bank account. My sister Catherine had never married, never had children. She'd devoted her life to her career as a biochemist, making breakthrough discoveries that had earned her a fortune. When she'd died suddenly of a heart attack 2 months ago, she'd left everything to me. "You're the only real family I ever had. Ellie?" She'd written in her will, "Take this money and do something that matters. Don't let them push you around." Catherine had known about my children's plans before I did. She'd seen the signs, the gradual distancing, the impatience in their voices when I called. She'd begged me to stand up for myself, to demand better treatment, but I'd been too set in my ways, too afraid of conflict, too hopeful that they would come to their senses on their own. Now, lying in this institutional bed, listening to the sounds of 100 other forgotten souls around me, I realized Catherine had been right. It was time to make some changes. The next morning, I asked one of the nurses about using the computer in the common room. "I want to look at some things," I said vaguely. What I actually wanted was to research Sunny Meadows itself. Who owned it? What was its financial situation? How much would it cost to buy? What I found was fascinating. Sunny Meadows was part of a small chain of 3 facilities owned by a company called Golden Years Holdings. The company was struggling financially, having taken out significant loans to expand too quickly. They were behind on payments to several creditors and facing potential bankruptcy. Perfect. I spent the rest of the week gathering more information. I learned about the staff turnover rate abysmal, the complaints filed with the state numerous, and the general reputation of the facilities poor to mediocre. I also observed the visiting patterns. Sunday was the busiest day, with about 30% of residents receiving visits. During the week, the percentage dropped to less than 10%. Most families, I realized, treated their weekly visit like a chore to be endured rather than time to be treasured, including my own children. Hannah had visited once since dropping me off. She'd stayed exactly 37 minutes, spending most of that time on her phone dealing with some real estate emergency. Daniel hadn't visited at all, though he'd called twice to ask how I was adjusting. As I watched other families go through the motions of caring, I began to formulate a plan. It was ambitious, perhaps even ridiculous for a 73-year-old woman, but I had $7 million, a lifetime of anger to fuel me, and nothing left to lose. By the end of my second week at Sunny Meadows, I had made my decision. I was going to buy this place, but I wasn't going to tell my children about it. Not yet. I took the bus into town on a Thursday morning, telling the staff I had a doctor's appointment. Instead, I went to the offices of Bradford and Associates, the best law firm in the city. I'd done my research. "I'd like to speak with someone about acquiring a business," I told the receptionist. Within an hour, I was sitting across from James Bradford himself, a man about Daniel's age with kind eyes and an expensive suit. "Mrs. Mitchell," he said, reviewing the notes his associate had taken. "I understand you're interested in purchasing Sunny Meadows. That's correct? May I ask what draws you to this particular investment?" I smiled, feeling genuinely happy for the first time in weeks. "Let's just say I have some ideas about how it could be run more efficiently." We spent the next 2 hours discussing strategy. Golden Years Holdings was desperate enough that a cash offer would likely be accepted quickly. The due diligence would take time, but Bradford assured me that with the company's financial difficulties, we'd have significant leverage. "There is one thing," I said as we wrapped up the meeting. "I'd like to remain anonymous during the negotiation process. Can you arrange for the purchase to be made through a trust or corporation?" Bradford nodded. "Absolutely. We can set up a purchasing entity that keeps your name out of the public records until after the sale is finalized." "Perfect. Over the next month, While my children continued their lives without giving me much thought, Bradford and his team worked tirelessly. Golden Years Holdings didn't just accept our offer, they practically begged us to take the properties off their hands. The purchase was finalized on a Tuesday evening in May. I was now the owner of 3 nursing homes, including the one I was living in. But the best part, I still had most of my $7 million left. Enough to make some serious improvements to the facilities. Enough to implement some new policies, especially regarding visiting hours. That night, I lay in my bed, soon to be my bed in my own facility, and smiled for the first time since arriving at Sunny Meadows. Tomorrow would begin a new chapter in my life, a chapter where I was in control, a chapter where my children would finally learn the consequences of their actions. I drifted off to sleep with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in months. The next morning, everything would change, and my children, those ungrateful children who had discarded me so easily, would finally understand what they had lost. But first, they would discover what I had gained. As I closed my eyes, I whispered a small thank you to my sister, Catherine. She had been right all along. It was time to stop letting them push me around, and push back. The morning after finalizing the purchase, I woke with a feeling I hadn't experienced in months. Control. For the first time since my children had deposited me at Sunny Meadows like an unwanted package, I felt like myself again. Karen Mitchell, the woman who had built a life from nothing, who had raised 2 children as a single mother after their father abandoned us, who had worked 3 jobs to put them through college. I dressed carefully in my best blue dress, the one I'd worn to Hannah's law school graduation. As I walked down the hallway toward the main office, I noticed things I'd overlooked during my time as a resident. The thin carpet was worn through in places, revealing the concrete beneath. The fluorescent lights hummed and flickered sporadically. The paint on the walls was chipped, and several ceiling tiles were stained from old leaks. These weren't signs of a well-managed facility. They were signs of a place where corners had been cut, where profit had been prioritized over dignity. The staff members I passed in the hallway looked tired. The day shift had only been on duty for an hour, and already they looked overwhelmed. I'd learned their names over the past month. Maria, who had 4 children at home and worked double shifts to make ends meet. Robert, a certified nursing assistant who was studying for his RN degree at night. Janet, the activities coordinator, who spent her own money on supplies because the budget was so tight. These were good people working in a broken system. Today, that would begin to change. I knocked on the door of Administrator Nancy Walsh's office. Through the glass panel, I could see her hunched over a desk covered in papers, probably bills and complaints. At 45, she looked closer to 60, the stress of running an underfunded facility having aged her prematurely. "Come in," she called wearily. "Ms. Walsh, I'm Karen Mitchell, room 237. Could I speak with you for a moment?" She looked up, surprised. Residents didn't typically request meetings with administration. "Of course, Mrs. Mitchell. Please sit down. How can I help you?" Instead of sitting in the visitor's chair, I moved to the corner where a stack of banker's boxes sat unopened. "Are these the files from Golden Years Holdings?" Nancy frowned, clearly confused. "Yes, they just arrived yesterday. But Mrs. Mitchell, I'm not sure why you'd be interested in—" "Because as of midnight last night, I own this facility." The words hung in the air between us. Nancy's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, shock, and finally, a careful wariness. "I'm sorry. What did you say?" I opened my purse and pulled out the legal documents Bradford had provided. I purchased Sunny Meadows, along with the other 2 facilities in the Golden Years chain. These papers confirm the transfer of ownership. Nancy's hands trembled slightly as she took the documents. I watched her scan the legal language, her eyes widening as she found her own name mentioned in the transition clauses. This is real. Very real. And Ms. Walsh, the first thing I want you to know is that you're not in any trouble. From what I've observed, you've been doing heroic work with impossible resources." She leaned back in her chair, looking like she might cry. "Mrs. Mitchell, I don't understand. You're a resident. How did a resident come to own the facility she lives in?" I smiled. "It's quite a story, actually. My sister Catherine was a biochemist, brilliant woman, never married, never had children. She left me everything when she died 2 months ago. Everything being $7 million. The silence that followed was deafening. Nancy set the papers down carefully, as if they might explode. Mrs. Mitchell, may I ask why you chose to buy Sunny Meadows? Surely, there were better investment opportunities. I settled back in my chair, finally taking the seat she'd offered. Because I live here, Ms. Walsh, and I've seen how things really work. I've watched good staff members quit because they can't afford to stay. I've seen residents go without proper care because there aren't enough people to provide it. I've seen families treat their elderly like burdens instead of blessings. My voice grew harder with each word. And I've decided it's time to make some changes. Nancy nodded slowly. What kind of changes? We'll start with staffing. I want you to prepare a report on what it would cost to hire enough people to properly staff this facility. CNAs, nurses, housekeeping, kitchen staff, maintenance, everyone. And I don't want bare minimum wages. I want to pay people enough that they want to work here, that they can support their families, that they don't have to choose between caring for our residents and caring for themselves. Nancy's eyes lit up, but I could see caution there, too. Mrs. Mitchell, that would require a significant budget increase. The previous owners were running this place into the ground. Ms. Walsh, I'm not interested in maximizing profits. I'm interested in maximizing care. I pulled out a tablet I'd purchased the week before. One of the benefits of being perceived as harmless was that people didn't monitor your activities too closely. I'd spent considerable time researching best practices in elder care. I want to implement a new visiting policy as well, I continued. What kind of policy? I scrolled through my notes. I've observed that most families treat visiting their elderly parents like a chore. They come when it's convenient for them, stay as briefly as possible, and seem to think that duty is fulfilled for another week or month. Nancy was nodding. She'd obviously noticed the same patterns. So here's what we're going to do. Families who visit less than twice a week will have their visiting hours restricted to Sunday afternoons, 2 to 4 p.m. only. Families who visit more frequently will have unlimited access, within reason. Nancy looked uncertain. Mrs. Mitchell, I'm not sure we can legally restrict visiting hours based on frequency of visits. The regulations. I've had my lawyers review the regulations thoroughly. As long as we're not discriminating based on protected classes, and as long as we allow some access to all families, we're within our rights to establish visiting policies that encourage more frequent contact with residents. I leaned forward, feeling the enthusiasm build in my voice. Ms. Walsh, these people are someone's parents, grandparents, spouses. They deserve better than to be visited like graves. Nancy was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. Mrs. Mitchell, in all my years of healthcare administration, I've never seen anything like this. Usually, new owners come in looking to cut costs, increase profits. You're talking about spending money like... She paused, searching for words. Like these people matter, yes, exactly like that. I stood up, smoothing my dress. Because they do matter. Ms. Walsh. Every one of them was someone's baby once. They've lived full lives, loved people, been loved in return. The fact that their own children have forgotten that doesn't mean we have to... Nancy stood as well, and I could see the transformation beginning in her demeanor. The weariness was still there, but it was joined by something else. Hope. What do you need from me? She asked. I need you to send a letter to all the families informing them of the policy change. The letter should be polite but firm. Give them 2 weeks to adjust their schedules. After that, the new system goes into effect. And the other change is, I want a complete assessment of the facility's needs. Every broken tile, every outdated piece of equipment, every understaffed department. We're going to fix it all. Nancy nodded, and for the first time since I'd been at Sunny Meadows, I saw her smile genuinely. Mrs. Mitchell, can I ask you something? Of course. Do your children know about any of this? I smiled, feeling a spark of satisfaction. Not yet, but they will. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of activity. True to her word, Nancy sent out letters to all families explaining the new visiting policy. The responses were immediate and vociferous. I was in my room when Hannah burst through the door on a Tuesday afternoon, waving a letter like a weapon. "Mom, what is this nonsense?" I looked up from my book calmly. "Hello, dear. It's lovely to see you, too." "Don't give me that. What is this about restricted visiting hours? Are you behind this somehow?" I set my book aside. "Behind what? Hannah, I'm just a resident here." "This is bull," she snapped, then immediately looked around as if the nursing home police might arrest her for profanity. "Sorry, but Mom, this is insane. Restricted visiting hours. Who do they think they are?" Daniel appeared in the doorway behind her, looking equally agitated. "Mom, this is about us. Isn't it because we haven't visited as much as we should?" I stood up slowly, feeling every one of my 73 years. "When was the last time the two of you were here at the same time?" They stopped their frantic discussions and looked at me. When was the last time both of my children were in this room together?" The silence stretched uncomfortably. "The day you moved me in," I answered for them. "Nearly 2 months ago." "Mom, that's not fair," Daniel said. "We've been busy. You know that." "I know that you've all visited exactly 3 times between you since you left me here," I said quietly. "Hannah once, Daniel twice, and Jessica not at all, unless you count the flowers." Hannah flushed. "I've been swamped with cases. And I'm sure you'd be swamped with cases if I were dying too." I interrupted. The words came out harsher than I'd intended, but I didn't regret them. It was time for some honesty. "Mom," Hannah said, her lawyer voice taking over. "This is ridiculous. We can fight this policy. It's clearly targeted harassment. Is it? Or is it simply asking families to prioritize the people they claim to love?" Daniel's phone buzzed. Without thinking, he pulled it out and glanced at it. The gesture was so automatic, so ingrained that he didn't even realize what he'd done until Hannah elbowed him. "See?" I said softly. "Even now, in the middle of this conversation, you can't resist the pull of something more important than your mother." Daniel put his phone away, shame coloring his features. "Mom, I'm sorry. It's just that I'm not a priority," I finished. "And that's fine. You're all adults with your own lives. But don't expect the world to accommodate your neglect anymore." Hannah's face was red with anger. "Neglect. We put you in this place because we love you, because we want you safe." "You put me in this place because I was inconvenient," I said, my voice steady despite the emotion welling up inside me. "Because caring for me would require sacrificing something from your comfortable lives." The room fell silent except for the institutional hum of the building around us. Finally, Daniel spoke. "So, what do we do now?" I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in months. "You follow the new rules. You visit twice a week, or you visit during the restricted hours. Your choice." "This is insane," Hannah muttered. "What has gotten into this place?" "Maybe they've just decided that residents deserve better," I suggested. Hannah narrowed her eyes, studying me. "Mom, there's something different about you. You're, what's the word, happier?" I offered. "Defiant," she corrected. I shrugged. "When you have nothing left to lose, defiance becomes easier." After they left, I could hear them arguing in the hallway. Their voices carried through the thin walls, expressing outrage, confusion, and demands to speak with management. I smiled to myself, imagining Nancy's carefully professional responses. Over the next week, something interesting happened. Faced with the prospect of restricted visiting hours, several families suddenly found time in their schedules. The common areas became busier during weekday afternoons. Residents who hadn't seen their families in weeks suddenly had regular visitors. Not all families, of course. Some simply accepted the Sunday afternoon restriction, viewing it as a reasonable compromise that freed them from the guilt of more frequent visits. But others, like my own children, struggled with the change. Hannah returned on Friday, clearly having spent the week in consultation with her legal team. "Mom, I've had several attorneys review this policy. It's discriminatory and possibly illegal." I was in the sunroom playing cards with 3 other residents. Hello, dear. Would you like to join us for gin rummy? I'm serious, Mom. We're going to fight this. I placed a card on the discard pile. You're certainly free to try. Margaret, my table mate, looked up from her cards. Is this one of your children, Karen? How lovely that she came to visit on a Friday. Yes, I said, smiling at Margaret. This is my daughter, Hannah. Hannah. This is Margaret. She hasn't seen her daughters in 4 months. Hannah shifted uncomfortably. I'm sorry to hear that. Oh, don't be sorry for me, dear, Margaret said cheerfully. I've gotten used to it, though I must admit, these new visiting policies have stirred things up. My youngest actually called yesterday to say she'd be coming this weekend. I met Hannah's eyes over the card table. Imagine that. Hannah pulled up a chair, clearly intending to have this conversation despite the audience. Mom, what do you know about these policy changes? Do you know who made the decision? I discarded a 7 of clubs. I imagine it came from management. But who specifically? Someone had to authorize this. I really wouldn't know, dear. I'm just a resident. The phrase had become my standard response, and I could see it was frustrating her, which was admittedly part of its appeal. Karen has been such a joy to have around, Harold chimed in from the next table. Always so positive, even with everything that's happened. Hannah looked confused. Everything that's happened. I gave Harold a warning look, but he was already continuing. Oh yes, with the new ownership and all the changes coming, Karen's been so supportive of the staff during the transition. Hannah went very still. New ownership. I felt the moment crystallizing around us. This wasn't how I'd planned for her to find out, but perhaps it was fitting, surrounded by other residents in the common area where she rarely bothered to visit, with witnesses to her shock. Yes, dear, I said calmly. Didn't I mention Sunny Meadows has new owners? They're very progressive in their approach to elder care. Hannah's face was unreadable. And when exactly did this change in ownership occur? Oh, about 2 weeks ago, I believe, the same day the letters about visiting policies were sent out. I could see her making the connection. I need to speak with you privately, Hannah said, her voice tight with control. Of course, but we're just finishing this hand. Gin, I laid down my cards triumphantly. Margaret clapped her hands. Wonderful. Karen, you're getting quite good at this. Hannah waited with visible impatience as I helped clear the cards and chatted briefly with my table mates. Finally, she practically dragged me to my room. The moment the door closed, she turned on me. What do you know about the new owners? I sat on my bed, smoothing the blanket. I know they seem very committed to improving conditions here. Mom, stop playing games. This is serious. Is it how serious enough to visit more than once every 2 months? Hannah closed her eyes, clearly trying to control her temper. Mom, please, I need you to be straight with me. Do you know who bought this place? I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. At 52, she was successful, confident, used to getting answers when she demanded them. She'd inherited my stubbornness, but none of my patience. Would it matter if I did? Yes, because something's not right here. The timing, the policies, the way they're treating families. You mean the way they're insisting families actually spend time with their elderly relatives? That's not... She stopped, frustration clear on her face. Mom, I know you're angry with us. Finally, some honesty. Yes, and maybe we deserve it. Maybe we haven't been the best children lately. I almost laughed at the understatement. Lately? But this isn't the way to handle it. If you're somehow involved in this... What exactly are you accusing me of, Hannah? She looked at me for a long moment, and I could see the wheels turning in her legal brain. I think you know more than you're letting on. I stood up and walked to the small window. Outside, I could see the parking lot where she'd left me 2 months ago. The memory still stung, but the pain had transformed into something else, something useful. Your phone is ringing, I said. Hannah looked down, startled. She'd been so focused on our conversation that she hadn't noticed. She glanced at the screen. It's work. I need to take this. Of course you do. She answered the call, and I listened to her rattle off legal advice to whoever was on the other end. As she talked, She paced around my small room, her attention completely absorbed by the crisis du jour. When she finally hung up, I was sitting calmly on my bed, hands folded. "Mom, I'm sorry. There's a situation at work that I really need to go," I said. "Your work is obviously more important. That's not what Isn't it? You came here specifically to confront me about something you think I might know. And the moment your phone rings, you abandon that conversation for work." She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. For a moment, she looked like the little girl I'd raised, caught between competing demands. "We'll continue this later," she said finally. "If you say so." She left, and I smiled to myself. The investigation was beginning sooner than I'd anticipated, but I was ready for it. That weekend, Daniel visited, clearly sent by Hannah. He tried a different approach, the disappointed son, but I maintained my innocent resident act. It was during Daniel's visit that Nancy Walsh knocked on my door. "Mrs. Mitchell, I'm sorry to interrupt, but could I speak with you?" Daniel looked up, interested. "You're the administrator, right? I wanted to talk to you about this visiting policy." Nancy glanced at me, and I gave a small nod. "I'd be happy to discuss it with you, Mr. Mitchell. I'm Mrs. Mitchell's son." "Ah," Nancy said, and I caught the slight smile. "Well, Mr. Mitchell, the new visiting policy has actually been quite successful. We've seen a 40% increase in family visits this week." "That's all well and good," Daniel said, "but I think targeting specific families for restriction is discriminatory. I can assure you that the policy applies to all families equally," Nancy replied smoothly. "No one family is being singled out." I watched the exchange with amusement. Nancy was handling this perfectly, professional yet firm. "Now," Nancy continued, "Mrs. Mitchell, I wanted to let you know that the contractor will be here Monday to look at the renovations we discussed." Daniel's eyes went wide. "Renovations?" "Oh, yes," Nancy said brightly. "The new owners are completely revamping the facility, new flooring throughout, updated equipment, expanded staff quarters. It's very exciting." "New owners?" Daniel was clearly trying to process this information. "Who are the new owners?" "I'm not at liberty to discuss specific details," Nancy said diplomatically, "but I can say they're very invested in providing the highest quality care for our residents." After Nancy left, Daniel turned to me. "Mom, did you know about the new owners?" "I'm aware there's been a change in management," I said carefully. "And you don't think it's strange, the timing?" I looked at my son, the one I'd held through nightmares, the one I'd taught to read, the one who'd forgotten my birthday for the past 3 years. What would be strange about it? "Dear," he studied my face, and I could see the suspicion growing. "Mom, is there something you're not telling us? Is there something you want to ask me directly?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. The question hung in the air between us, unasked but understood. Finally, he looked away. "I should go. I have a dinner tonight." "Of course you do." After he left, I realized my transformation was nearly complete. I was no longer the abandoned mother, pathetically grateful for any scrap of attention. I was becoming someone else, someone who held all the cards and was finally ready to play them. But I wasn't quite ready to reveal my hand. Not yet. The game was just getting interesting. That night, I received a call from Hannah. "Mom, we need to talk, all of us." "About what, dear?" "You know about what, tomorrow, 1:00. She hung up before I could respond. I smiled in the darkness of my room. They were finally taking me seriously. It was about time. Sunday arrived with the weight of anticipation I hadn't felt in years. My children were coming together again, not to dump me somewhere or divide my belongings, but because they finally sensed that something had shifted in the balance of power. I dressed in my finest outfit, a navy blue dress with pearls that Catherine had given me for my 60th birthday clothes that spoke of dignity and self-respect rather than institutional dependency. At precisely 1:00 they arrived. Hannah led the charge, her jaw set with the determination of someone who'd spent considerable time preparing for battle. Daniel followed, looking uncomfortable but resolute. I noticed his wife Lily had joined them this time, hovering cautiously behind my son. "Mom," Hannah said without preamble, "we need to talk." How lovely, I replied, gesturing to the chairs in my small room. Please sit down. They arranged themselves stiffly, and I noticed they'd chosen seating that positioned them facing me like an interview panel. Hannah had clearly coached them on strategy. Mom, Daniel began, his voice gentler than Hannah's. We've been talking, and we need to understand what's happening here. Happening, I'm not sure what you mean. Hannah leaned forward. Let's cut to the chase. We know you know something about the new owners of this facility. I folded my hands in my lap, maintaining my innocent expression. Do I? Mom, don't, Lily interjected, her voice strained. We're not stupid. The timing is too coincidental. The policies are too specifically targeted. Targeted at what, dear? At families who don't visit enough, Hannah said flatly. At families like us. The honesty was refreshing, even if it came clothed in accusation rather than regret. And you think I somehow orchestrated this? I asked. We think you know more than you're saying, Daniel said carefully. And we think you're using that knowledge to punish us. I looked at each of them in turn. Hannah with her legal mind, always searching for leverage. Daniel with his business sense, recognizing patterns in the chaos. Lily with her nervous eyes, probably already calculating the cost of more frequent visits. Tell me, I said quietly, when was the last time any of you asked me how I was doing? Really asked, not just as a pleasantry while you were rushing to leave. They exchanged glances. That's not, Hannah began. When was the last time any of you sat with me for more than an hour? When was the last time you brought the grandchildren to visit? When was the last time you treated me like family instead of an obligation? The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Mom, Lily said softly, tears forming in her eyes. We know we haven't been perfect. Perfect, I almost laughed. You haven't been children at all. You've been executives managing an unwanted asset while its owner was still alive. Hannah's face flushed. That's not fair. We were trying to do what was best for you. No, I said, my voice harder now. You were trying to do what was easiest for you. Daniel rubbed his forehead. Okay, maybe we screwed up. But Mom, you have to tell us what you know about this place. I stood slowly, my joints protesting, but my resolve strengthening. What I know, Daniel, is that this place is finally being run by people who understand that residents are human beings, not warehoused goods. Mom, Hannah tried again. We've done some research. The company that bought Sunny Meadows paid cash. $4.7 million. That's a lot of money from an unknown buyer. My heart skipped a beat. They were getting close to the truth, but I wasn't ready. Not yet. That does sound like a substantial amount, I agreed neutrally. Mom, please. Lily was crying openly now. Just tell us what's going on. We're trying to understand. I felt a pang of sympathy for her, but it was tempered by the memory of 3 months of abandonment. What's going on, Lily, is that someone finally decided the residents of Sunny Meadows deserved better than being forgotten by their families. But who? Hannah pressed. Who decided that who had the money to make it happen? I moved to the window, looking out at the parking lot where they'd left me all those weeks ago. Does it matter who? What matters is that it's happening. It matters, Hannah insisted, because this affects our family. These policies are hurting us. I turned back to them, feeling something cold settle in my chest. Hurting you? How exactly are they hurting you? We have lives, Mom, Daniel said. Responsibilities. We can't just visit your mother more than once a month. Just show up because she's your family and not because you're checking an item off your to-do list. The room fell silent except for the humming of the air conditioning and Lily's soft crying. I'm going to ask you something, I said, sitting back down. And I want honest answers. They waited. If I were dying, would you visit more often? They looked uncomfortable, but Hannah nodded. Of course. If I had cancer, would you clear your schedules? Mom, don't be morbid, Daniel protested. Answer the question. Yes, Lily whispered. We would. So you would visit me more if I were dying or critically ill. But while I'm simply old and lonely, you can't be bothered. Hannah's face was red. That's not what we said. It's exactly what you said. You would make time if my situation were more dramatic. more urgent. But quiet desperation, slow loneliness, the gradual fading away of someone who used to be central to your lives that doesn't rate priority time. I stood again, my energy building with each word. You want to know who the new owners are. You want to know who had the money to change policies. You want to know who cared enough about the residents here to make visiting family a priority instead of an option. The three of them leaned forward. Someone, I said, who understands what it feels like to be discarded. Someone who knows that money can't buy love, but it can demand a minimum standard of respect. Hannah's eyes narrowed. Mom, do you know who bought this place? I met her gaze steadily. I know many things, Hannah. I know that your father never paid child support after the divorce. I know that I worked myself nearly to death to give you opportunities. I know that each of you owes me more than you could ever repay, not because I want you to, but because it's simply true. Mom, Daniel said, you're scaring us. Good, I replied. You should be scared. You should be terrified that your own mother had to resort to strategic manipulation to get her children to visit her. Lily wiped her tears. Manipulation. You think these policies are manipulation. Then what do you call abandoning me here and expecting me to be grateful? The temperature in the room seemed to drop. My children looked at me as if they were seeing me for the first time. Not the gentle, accommodating mother they remembered, but someone harder, more formidable. We didn't abandon you, Hannah said, but her voice lacked conviction. You drove me here, left me in a sterile room, and disappeared from my life. You divided my belongings like I was already dead. You sold my house, my home, without asking what I wanted. What exactly would you call that? We thought, Daniel began. You thought I was weak. You thought I was helpless. You thought I would quietly disappear into this place and leave you alone to live your successful lives without the burden of an aging mother. I moved closer to them, and they instinctively drew back. But you were wrong about me. You've always been wrong about me. What do you mean? Lily asked fearfully. I mean that you've all forgotten where you come from. Hannah, I put myself through night school to understand your homework. Daniel, I learned mechanics so I could help you fix your first car. I memorized financial terms so I could follow your conversations about business. I paused, letting that sink in. You all think you achieved success on your own, but every foundation you built on was laid by my hands, paid for with my sacrifice. Hannah stood up, her lawyer instincts finally kicking in. Mom, what exactly are you saying? I smiled, feeling the power shift between us. I'm saying that you all drastically underestimated me, and that's going to cost you. Cost us, Daniel's voice cracked. Cost us what? Your comfort, your assumptions, your ability to treat me like a convenient afterthought. Lily was hyperventilating now. Mom, are you the new owner? Did you buy this place? The question hung in the air like a blade waiting to fall. I could see the fear in their eyes, the dawning realization that their harmless, dependent mother might not be who they thought she was. But I wasn't ready to answer that question. Not yet. What I am, I said slowly, is a woman who spent 50 years taking care of ungrateful children and who has finally decided to take care of herself. Before they could respond, there was a knock at the door. Nancy Walsh entered, looking professional in her Sunday best. I'm sorry to interrupt, she said, but Mrs. Mitchell, we need to discuss the renovation timeline with you. The word with hung heavy in the air. Not about you. With you. My children stared at Nancy, then at me, the implications clear. Of course, I said smoothly. Children, excuse me for a moment. Nancy and I stepped into the hallway, leaving my 3 offspring sitting in stunned silence. Mrs. Mitchell, Nancy said quietly once we were out of earshot. They're getting suspicious. I know. It was inevitable. Are you ready to tell them? I looked back at my closed door, behind which my children were probably frantically whispering theories and accusations. Not yet. Let them stew a bit longer. Let them really understand what they're asking for. Nancy nodded. The contractors found some unexpected issues with the East Wing. Nothing major, but it'll add about 2 weeks to the timeline. That's fine. Quality work takes time. As we discussed practical matters, I could hear muffled voices from my room. They were arguing probably about whether to stay and wait for answers or leave and regroup. "Mrs. Mitchell," Nancy asked, "there's something else. Your son called this morning asking for a meeting with administration." "Which son?" "Daniel. He wanted to discuss the visiting policies from a business perspective. He seemed to think he could negotiate." I almost laughed. Of course he did. "What did you tell him?" "That our policies are non-negotiable, but that he's welcome to schedule an appointment to discuss his concerns." "Good. When tomorrow at 10:00, I nodded thoughtfully. "I think I'll attend that meeting." Nancy's eyebrows rose. "As what? As the owner, of course." When Nancy left, I returned to my room to find my children exactly as I'd suspected in heated, whispered conversation that stopped the moment I appeared. "Well," Hannah said, attempting to regain control. "That was interesting." "Nancy is very dedicated to her job," I said blandly. "Mom," Daniel said, "she talked to you like you were, say, like I was what, like you were someone important, not just any resident." I sat back down, straightening my skirt. Perhaps she simply respects her residents as individuals rather than problems to be managed. "That's not what I meant, and you know it," Daniel said, frustration clear in his voice. Lily had been uncharacteristically quiet. Now she spoke up, her voice small. "Mom, I called the bank Friday." My heart rate quickened, but I kept my expression neutral. "Oh, and why would you do that?" "To check on your account, to make sure you were okay financially with the move and everything." "How thoughtful of you." "They said they couldn't give me information without authorization." "Of course they did. Banking privacy laws." "But Mom," she continued, her voice growing stronger, "the representative asked if I was calling about the Karen Mitchell with the recent large transaction, or a different Karen Mitchell." The room went silent. Hannah and Daniel turned to stare at Lily, then at me. "Large transaction." Hannah's voice was deadly quiet. "What large transaction?" Daniel demanded. I looked at each of them calmly. "I'm afraid banking privacy laws prevent me from discussing such matters." "Mom!" Lily exploded. "Don't you dare! We know something's happening. We know you're involved somehow." "Involved in what?" "In buying this place," Hannah said, her lawyer training taking over. "You bought Sunny Meadows, didn't you?" The accusation hung in the air like smoke. 3 pairs of eyes bored into me, waiting for confirmation or denial. I stood slowly, feeling every one of my 73 years, but also feeling more powerful than I had in decades. "You really want to know?" I asked quietly. They all leaned forward. "You really want the truth about your mother? About who I am, and what I'm capable of?" They nodded collectively. "Fine," I said, walking to my small closet. From behind my dresses, I pulled out a folder. From the folder, I extracted a single document. I held it up so they could see the letterhead Bradford and Associates, attorneys at law. "This," I said, "is the deed of sale for Sunny Meadows." Hannah's face went white. Daniel's mouth fell open. Lily made a sound like a wounded animal. "And this," I continued, pointing to a signature line, "is my name, the new sole owner of this facility." The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Daniel found his voice. "How?" he croaked. I smiled, feeling vindicated and powerful and terrifyingly in control for the first time in months. "Catherine," I said simply. "My sister Catherine left me everything when she died." $7 million, $7 million, Hannah repeated numbly. "And I used it to buy this place. Your mother, the helpless burden you dumped here, now owns the facility." Lily was crying again, but these were different tears. Tears of shock, of realization, of fear. "But why?" Daniel asked. "Why would you do this?" I looked at my children, my ungrateful, selfish, successful children, and felt all the anger and hurt of the past months crystallize into something hard and bright. "Because," I said, "someone needed to teach you what happens when you treat love like an inconvenience." I moved to the door and opened it. "Now, I think you should leave. Visiting hours for restricted families end at 4 p.m. For a moment, None of them moved. Then Hannah stood slowly, followed by Daniel and Lily. "Mom," Hannah said, her voice shaking, "we need to talk about this. Do we?" "Why you've made it clear that talking to me isn't a priority." They filed out slowly, and I could see the wheels turning in each of their heads. Hannah was probably thinking about legal challenges. Daniel was likely considering business implications. Lily was probably calculating numbers, trying to understand how she'd missed such a significant financial development. As they reached the hallway, I called out, "Oh, and children." They turned back. "Daniel, Nancy mentioned you have an appointment tomorrow at 10 Ceres. I'll be attending that meeting." Daniel's face paled. "You'll be what?" "I'll be attending your appointment with administration. As the owner, I think it's important to hear your concerns firsthand." The implications of this hit them like physical blows. Their mother, the woman they discarded, was now their adversary in a game where she held all the cards. After they left, I closed the door and leaned against it, my heart pounding. The secret was out partially. Anyway, they knew I owned the facility, but they didn't yet understand the full scope of what that meant. Tomorrow's meeting would be interesting. Daniel thought he was going to negotiate with administration about visiting policies. Instead, he was going to sit across from his mother and try to explain why she should make it easier for him to continue neglecting her. I walked to my window and looked out at the parking lot. I could see them standing by their cars, engaged in what appeared to be a heated discussion, probably arguing about what to do, how to handle this unexpected revelation. As I watched, Lily suddenly doubled over, and Hannah and Daniel rushed to her side. For a moment, genuine concern replaced my satisfaction. Was she having a panic attack? Had the shock been too much? But then she straightened, said something to her siblings, and got in her car. They all drove away separately, and I was alone again. I sat on my bed, the deed still in my hand, and realized that everything was about to change. The secret was out, and there was no going back. Tomorrow, the real battle would begin. But for the first time in months, I wasn't afraid of that battle. I was looking forward to it. After all, they'd trained me well. 50 years of being underestimated, dismissed, and manipulated had taught me how these games were played. The difference was now I held all the cards, and I finally understood their value. I spent the evening making lists, preparing for tomorrow's confrontation. I wanted to be ready for every argument, every accusation, every desperate attempt to reframe the narrative in their favor. As the sun set outside my window, painting the walls of my room in shades of gold and amber, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, excitement about the future. Tomorrow, my children would learn what their mother was really made of, and I suspected they weren't going to like the answer. Monday morning arrived with the crisp efficiency of vengeance. I rose early, choosing a power suit I hadn't worn in years. The same dark charcoal jacket and skirt I'd worn to my divorce proceedings 40 years ago. It still fit, though it now hung on a frame that had grown more delicate with age. But delicate didn't mean fragile, as my children were about to learn. At 9:30, I made my way to the administrative wing, passing residents I'd grown fond of over the past months. Harold waved from his wheelchair by the activities room where he was organizing a book club. Margaret smiled as she headed to her physical therapy session. These people deserved so much more than what they'd been getting, and now they would have it. Nancy was already in the main conference room when I arrived, arranging papers on the polished oak table. She looked up as I entered, her expression a mixture of professional composure and barely contained excitement. "Mrs. Mitchell," she said warmly, "are you ready for this?" I smoothed my jacket and took a seat at the head of the table, a position that would have been impossible to claim just 24 hours ago. "I've been ready for this for months. Nancy, perhaps years." At exactly 10 Sauziers, there was a knock at the door. Nancy stood to answer it, and Daniel walked in wearing his best business suit and the confident expression of someone who believed he was about to negotiate from a position of strength. His confidence evaporated the moment he saw me sitting at the table. "Mom, what are you doing here?" "Good morning, Daniel. Please have a seat." He remained standing, looking between Nancy and me with growing alarm. I'm supposed to be meeting with administration about the visiting policies. And so you are, I replied calmly. I am the administration. Nancy took this as her cue. Mr. Mitchell, I'd like you to meet Karen Mitchell, the new owner of Sunny Meadows, and your mother. Daniel's legs seemed to give out, and he sank into the chair across from me. I don't understand. What's not to understand? Your mother owns this facility. She makes the policies, and she's decided that families who can't be bothered to visit regularly aren't entitled to unlimited access. He stared at me like I'd sprouted a second head. But how? Where did you get the money? From the sister you never visited either. Catherine left everything to me when she died. Everything being $7 million. Daniel's face cycled through a range of emotions. Shock, disbelief, hurt, and finally calculation. I could almost see the wheels turning in his mind, trying to figure out how this new information affected his position. Mom, he said finally, if you had that kind of money, why didn't you tell us we could have helped you manage it? Invested it properly. Made sure you were taken care of. I leaned back in my chair, studying my son. At 48, he still thought he could manipulate his mother with promises of care and protection. Taken care of, I repeated. Like how you took care of me when you decided I needed to live here. That's different. You thought I needed to be out of your way. My voice remained calm, but steel crept into my tone. You thought I was a burden you could dump somewhere convenient. Daniel looked around the room as if searching for an escape route or a hidden camera that would reveal this was all an elaborate joke. Nancy, he said desperately, surely there's been some mistake. My mother can't just buy a nursing home and change policies to target specific families. Nancy consulted the papers in front of her. Actually, Mr. Mitchell, Mrs. Mitchell has every legal right to establish visiting policies as the property owner. And I should point out that these policies aren't targeting anyone specifically. They apply equally to all families. But you know they're designed to punish families who don't visit enough. I leaned forward. Punish Daniel, or motivate, what's the difference? The difference is intent. I'm not trying to punish you for neglect. I'm trying to incentivize you to act like my children instead of distant relatives. Daniel ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I recognized from his childhood when he was frustrated. Mom, this is crazy. You can't just buy a nursing home because you're unhappy with how often we visit. Can't I? I smiled. I believe the legal documents would disagree with you. He stood up abruptly, beginning to pace. This is insane. What happens now? What are you planning to do? I'm planning to run this facility the way it should be run, with respect for the residents, with proper staffing, with policies that encourage families to actually participate in their loved ones' lives. And if we don't comply, if we don't meet your impossible standards, then you visit during restricted hours, 2 to 4 on Sundays. My voice was pleasant, conversational. It's really quite simple. Daniel stopped pacing and turned to face me fully. Mom, I have a business to run. I have employees depending on me. I can't just drop everything twice a week to visit. No one's asking you to drop everything. I'm asking you to prioritize your mother who raised you, who sacrificed for you, who is now elderly and living in an institutional setting. But you chose to live here. The words hung in the air like a slap. Nancy shifted uncomfortably in her seat. I stood slowly, my hands flat on the table. I chose nothing. Daniel, you and your sister decided I was too much trouble to keep at home. You forced me here despite my protests. And now that I own this place, suddenly you're concerned about my choices. Daniel's face flushed red. That's not how it happened. Then how did it happen, Daniel? Enlighten me. We were worried about you. You're getting older, and you thought it would be easier to warehouse me here than to adjust your precious schedules to check on me occasionally. He sat back down, his shoulders sagging. Mom, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry we haven't been better children, but this is such an extreme response. Is it what would have been an appropriate response to being abandoned by my own children? We didn't abandon you. I moved to the window that overlooked the parking lot, the same parking lot where I'd watched them drive away without a backward glance. 3 months ago, Daniel, after you dropped me here, how many times did you visit in the first month? He was quiet. How many times? Once, he admitted quietly. Once in 30 days. And that visit lasted how long? About 20 minutes. I nodded. 20 minutes for your mother who raised you for 18 years. The silence stretched between us. Finally, Nancy cleared her throat diplomatically. Mr. Mitchell, perhaps we could discuss constructive ways to move forward. Daniel looked at me with something approaching desperation. Mom, what do you want from us? I returned to my seat, folding my hands on the table. I want you to visit your mother. I want you to spend time with me because you love me, not because you're checking off a duty. I want you to treat me like a person you care about rather than an obligation you resent. But the restricted hours are a consequence, not a punishment. Show me that you value our relationship and the restrictions disappear. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked, What about Hannah and Lily? Do they know about all this? They know I own the facility, but they don't yet understand what that truly means. What does it mean? I smiled, feeling the power of my position fully for the first time. It means that the balance has shifted. Daniel, it means that I'm no longer dependent on your goodwill or convenience. It means that I finally have the leverage to demand better treatment. Nancy consulted her watch. I'm afraid I have another appointment, but perhaps you two would like to continue this conversation. After Nancy left, Daniel and I sat in awkward silence. Finally, he spoke. Mom, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to undo what we did. You start by acknowledging what you did, and you continue by doing better. But the business, my responsibilities, will survive if you take 2 afternoons a week to visit your mother. He looked at me with a mixture of frustration and something that might have been respect. You're really doing this. You're really turning our lives upside down. I'm ensuring that my remaining years aren't spent in loneliness while my children live their busy lives and hope I die quietly and conveniently. The harsh words hit their mark. Daniel flinched visibly. Mom, that's not... We don't want you to die. No. Then why are you waiting until I'm gone to feel guilty about neglecting me? Before he could answer, Hannah burst through the conference room door like a storm system. She must have been speeding to get here so quickly. Mom, we need to talk right now. Hannah, I said pleasantly. How lovely. Are you here for a scheduled visit? She slammed her briefcase on the table. Cut the act, Mom. We know what you're doing. Do you? This is financial manipulation. It's elder care fraud. It's abuse of power. I raised an eyebrow. What law have I broken? Counselor? Hannah's face was flushed with anger and exertion. You used deception to gain control of our care situation. You manipulated us emotionally while hiding significant assets. I bought a business with my own money that was legally mine to spend however I chose. But you didn't tell us about the inheritance. Was I obligated to... Hannah opened her mouth, then closed it. As a lawyer, she knew I hadn't technically done anything illegal. And, I continued, you didn't ask about my financial situation. You simply assumed I was helpless and dependent. Mom, we just tried to push me aside so you wouldn't have to deal with me. Stripped me of my home and my dignity without a thought to what I wanted. That's not what we meant to do. Intentions are meaningless when the result is cruelty. Daniel looked between us. Hannah, how did you get here so fast? I've been parked outside since 9. I hired a private investigator. I straightened in my chair. This was an interesting development. A private investigator. Hannah pulled out a thick folder. His name is James Rodriguez. Very thorough, very expensive. She spread documents across the table like accusations bank records, property transfer documents, correspondence between myself and Bradford and Associates. You planned this, she said. You planned all of this before you even came here. I examined the papers with curiosity rather than concern. Planned what, specifically? You bought this place knowing we'd have to follow your rules. You engineered this entire situation. Hannah, dear, I said calmly, you're giving me far too much credit. I didn't plan anything. I simply responded to circumstances as they arose. Bullshit! Both Daniel and I looked at her in surprise. Hannah rarely used profanity. You want to know what James found? She continued, her voice rising. You contacted Bradford and Associates 3 days before we moved you here. 3 days. Mom? You were already planning to buy this place before we'd even told you about it. This was partially true, and I'd known it might come to light eventually, but Hannah's interpretation was flawed. I contacted Bradford about estate planning, I said truthfully. Catherine had just died, and I needed legal advice about the inheritance. And Bradford just happened to suggest buying a nursing home. No, I came up with that idea after you deposited me here like unwanted furniture. Daniel looked confused. What are you talking about? Hannah turned to him. She's been playing us. Daniel, this whole thing, the hurt feelings, the surprise at the visiting policies, it's all been an act. I stood up, my patience finally wearing thin. An act? You think my hurt was an act. You think my loneliness was performance art. I think you manipulated the situation to punish us. Hannah, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. You don't know what you're talking about. She pulled out her phone and showed me a recording app. Actually, I think I do. James found some very interesting information about Catherine's will. My stomach clenched, but I kept my expression neutral. Catherine didn't just leave you money. Mom, she left you a very specific letter, a letter that James was able to obtain through creative means. She pressed play on the recording. Catherine's voice, weak but determined, filled the room. Ellie, if you're hearing this, it means I'm gone and you've learned about the inheritance. Those children of yours are going to abandon you. They're going to put you somewhere to rot while they continue their selfish lives. Don't let them. Use this money to turn the tables. Show them what it feels like to have someone else hold all the power. The recording continued, but I was no longer listening. The room felt like it was spinning. This letter was dated 2 weeks before Catherine died, Hannah said accusingly. 2 weeks before you knew we were planning to move you here. She told you exactly what we were going to do, and she encouraged you to seek revenge. Daniel looked stricken. Mom, is this true? I sat down heavily, feeling my age for the first time all day. The secret I'd hoped never to reveal was out. Catherine knew, I admitted quietly. She saw the signs, the way you were all pulling away, the way you talked about me like I was a burden. So, you plotted this together. Hannah's voice was sharp with accusation. Catherine died before you made your decision. I chose my response on my own. But you knew, Daniel said. You knew before we told you. I looked at my children, my successful, angry, self-righteous children, and felt a complex mix of love and disappointment. I hoped I was wrong, I said. Up until the day you came to my house, I hoped Catherine was just being paranoid. I hoped my own children would surprise me. But we didn't. Lily's voice came from the doorway. None of us had heard her arrive. She looked terrible. Her eyes were red from crying, her hair disheveled. She clutched a tissue box like a lifeline. We did exactly what Aunt Catherine said we would. Lily entered the room and collapsed into a chair. I didn't sleep at all last night. I kept thinking about what we did, how we just disposed of you. Hannah shot her a warning look. Lily, no. Hannah, she's right. We did abandon her, and Aunt Catherine knew we would, because she could see what we'd become. The room fell silent except for Lily's quiet crying. The worst part, she continued, is that even now, even knowing you own this place, my first thought isn't shame or regret. It's damage control. How do we manage this situation? How do we minimize the impact on our lives? Her honesty was startling in its self-awareness. What kind of people have we become? Mom, I reached across the table and took her hand. You became busy adults. You became people focused on your own success. You became exactly what I taught you to become. What do you mean? I raised you to be independent. I raised you to put your own families first. I raised you to chase success. I didn't know that would mean you'd leave me behind. Hannah was still standing, her documents scattered across the table. So what happens now? Mom, where do we go from here? I stood again, feeling older, but also strangely lighter now that everything was out in the open. Now, you choose, I said. You decide what kind of children you want to be to your mother in her remaining years. But the restrictions are non-negotiable for families who visit less than twice a week. They're my rules in my facility. Daniel looked defeated. So we comply or we lose you entirely. You lost me already, I said softly. The question now is whether you want to find me again. The silence that followed was thick with unspoken recriminations and regrets. Finally, Lily spoke. What if we try? What if we actually show up and spend time with you? What then? Then we'll see what happens. We'll see if it's possible to rebuild what's been broken. Hannah gathered her papers with sharp, angry movements. This is blackmail. Mom, emotional blackmail. No, Hannah, this is consequences. This is, for the first time in your lives, you're experiencing consequences for treating someone badly. She paused in her packing. What about the other children? What about Harold's daughters who never visit? What about Margaret's kids? Are they getting restricted visiting hours? 2. Everyone follows the same rules. Everyone faces the same consequences. That's not what I meant. I know what you meant. You want to know why I had the power to change things while other abandoned parents don't. The answer is simple. I had the means. Catherine gave me the means. Daniel finally spoke up. What about the money? What happens to the inheritance now? I almost smiled at the question. Even in crisis, it came back to money. The money is mine, Daniel. It will be used to improve this facility and ensure proper care for all residents. All of it, whatever's necessary. Hannah closed her briefcase with a snap. We need time to think about this. Of course you do. But remember, the visiting restrictions are in effect immediately. Lily wiped her eyes. Mom, can I ask you something? Anything? Do you still love us after everything we've done? The question hit me harder than any accusation had. I looked at my youngest daughter-in-law, at Daniel with his confused desperation, at Hannah with her defensive anger. Yes, I whispered. I still love you. That's why this hurt so much. They left together, heads bent in discussion. I watched them go, feeling a strange mix of victory and sorrow. Nancy returned shortly after, looking concerned. How did it go? As well as could be expected, I said. They know everything now, and now we'll see what they choose to do with that knowledge. I gathered the papers Hannah had left behind, evidence of her investigation, proof of Catherine's letter, documentation of my planning. Looking at them now, I realized how calculated my actions must seem from the outside. But they didn't understand the months of loneliness that had preceded these decisions. They didn't understand the hope that had gradually died as I'd waited for visits that never came, calls that were never made. Mrs. Mitchell, I looked up at Nancy. Whatever happens next, you should know that what you're doing here, it's going to help a lot of families. Sometimes people need consequences to remember what's important. I nodded, suddenly feeling very tired. I hope you're right, Nancy. I truly hope you're right. 3 weeks passed in an eerie quiet. No visits, no phone calls, no angry confrontations in my room. My children had vanished from my life as completely as if they'd never existed, leaving me with the silence I'd grown so familiar with before this whole ordeal began. But the silence felt different now. It wasn't the silence of abandonment. It was the silence of a choice being made. They were processing, planning, perhaps grieving the comfortable dynamic we'd all lived with for so long. I found myself oddly at peace during these days, focusing on the renovations that were transforming Sunny Meadows from a neglected warehouse into something approaching dignity. The contractors had finished the east wing, and the difference was remarkable. Gone were the buzzing fluorescent lights, replaced with warm LED fixtures that didn't flicker or hum. The dingy yellow walls had been painted in soothing blues and greens, and the worn carpet had been replaced with durable but attractive flooring that wouldn't show every stain and wear pattern. More importantly, the staff changes were taking effect. We'd hired 12 new certified nursing assistants, 4 additional registered nurses, 2 more housekeeping staff, and expanded our kitchen team. The difference was visible not just in the quality of care, but in the faces of the employees themselves. They moved with purpose rather than weary resignation. Margaret had tears in her eyes when she told me about her bath. Karen, they took their time. The aide actually asked me about the water temperature twice. She gave me dignity. You know, Harold was thriving in our expanded physical therapy program. "Look at me go," he called out during his session, managing 3 steps with his walker without assistance. These small victories kept me grounded during the long days of waiting for my children to make their choice. On a Tuesday afternoon that had started like any other, Nancy knocked on my door with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Mrs. Mitchell, you have visitors." My heart skipped, but I kept my voice steady. "Oh, all 3 of them. They're in the family conference room. They asked if you would meet with them." I glanced at the clock. 3:15 on a Tuesday afternoon. No one was supposed to be here. If they were following the restricted visiting hours, they could only come on Sundays from 2 to 4. This was either a flagrant violation of the rules or something else entirely. I took my time getting ready, choosing a simple gray dress that projected competence without arrogance. Whatever was coming, I wanted to meet it with dignity. The family conference room was one of the spaces we'd renovated completely. Gone was the sterile white box with fluorescent lighting. In its place was a warm, comfortable room with soft lighting, upholstered chairs arranged around a round table, and windows that actually showed the garden we'd just finished landscaping. My 3 visitors were already seated when I arrived. They looked different, not just physically, though they all showed signs of the stress I suspected they'd been under. Hannah's usually immaculate appearance was slightly disheveled, her suit wrinkled in a way that suggested she'd been sitting for hours. Daniel had dark circles under his eyes and the pallor of someone who hadn't been sleeping well. Lily looked smaller somehow, hunched in on herself in a way I hadn't seen since she was a nervous new bride. They all stood when I entered, a gesture of respect I hadn't seen from them in years. "Mom," Hannah said, her voice formal but stripped of its usual sharpness. "Thank you for meeting with us." I took the chair they'd left empty. Notably, it was positioned as part of the circle rather than at the head of the table. Another small gesture that didn't go unnoticed. "You're violating the visiting policy," I observed mildly. "We know," Daniel said. "We'll accept whatever consequences you think are appropriate." This was unexpected. I studied their faces, trying to read the dynamics at play. "Very well. What did you want to discuss?" They exchanged glances, and some silent communication passed between them. Finally, Lily spoke. "Mom, we've spent the last 3 weeks talking about you. About us. About what kind of family we've become." She paused, struggling with her words. "We hired a family counselor, Dr. Patricia Morrison. She specializes in elder care issues and family dynamics." I raised an eyebrow. "A counselor," Hannah nodded. "We realized we needed professional help. We couldn't figure out how to fix what we'd broken." "And what did this counselor tell you?" Daniel leaned forward. "She made us confront some hard truths, Mom, about how we'd been treating you, about the assumptions we'd made." "What assumptions?" "That you would always be there," Hannah said quietly. "That no matter how badly we treated you, no matter how much we ignored you, you'd still love us and be available when we finally found time for you." Lily wiped at her eyes. "She made us realize that moving you here wasn't about your safety. It was about our convenience." The admission hung in the air between us. I felt a mix of vindication and sadness. Vindication that they could finally see the truth. Sadness that it had taken such extreme measures. "We came to apologize," Daniel said. "Really apologize, not just go through the motions, and to propose something." I waited. "We want to try again," Lily said. "All of us. But we want to do it right this time." "Define right," I said. Hannah pulled out a sheet of paper. "We've made a schedule, not just for visits, but for real time together. Meals, activities, conversations that aren't just checking off our duty." She handed me the paper. It was detailed, thoughtful, and represented a significant commitment of time from all 3 of them. "This is 3 visits per week minimum for each of you," I observed. "We know," Daniel said, "and we've adjusted our work schedules to accommodate it." "Adjusted how?" "I hired an additional manager for my shops," Daniel explained. "Someone I can trust to handle day-to-day operations when I'm here." I've moved some of my cases to junior associates, Hannah added, and I've blocked out Tuesday and Thursday afternoons as non-negotiable personal time. Lily nodded. I've restructured my client meetings. No more late afternoon appointments on visiting days. These were significant professional sacrifices, the kind of changes that would cost them money and perhaps slow their career advancement. Why? I asked simply. Because, Lily said, tears flowing freely now. Losing you would be worse than any professional setback. Because we love you, Daniel added. And we're finally old enough to admit that our success means nothing if we lose the person who made it possible. Because, Hannah said, her voice cracking. Dr. Morrison asked us a question that we couldn't answer. What question? She asked us what we wanted people to say about us at our funerals. Did we want to be remembered as successful professionals who abandoned their mother, or as people who understood what truly mattered? I felt tears starting in my own eyes, but I held them back. This was beautiful, but I'd been hurt too deeply to accept words alone. What about your families, your children? Daniel answered first. I talked to Mark about it. He said he'd been wondering when I'd remember that I had a mother. He actually apologized to me for not speaking up sooner. He and the kids are coming with me for weekend visits. Sarah and Jaden have been asking about you. They've been asking about you. Hannah just nodded, unable to speak through her tears. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of years of neglect and hurt present in the room like a living thing. There's something else, Hannah said finally. We want to make amends, but we know that visiting more isn't enough. What do you mean? Daniel pulled out an envelope. We've been talking with our lawyers and accountants about how to repair some of the financial damage we caused. What financial damage? Your house. Mom, Lily said. We forced you to sell it to pay for your care here. That was wrong. Hannah nodded. We pressured you into liquidating your assets for our peace of mind. We stole your choices. Daniel opened the envelope and pulled out a check. This is the first installment. It's the full amount we got from selling your house, plus interest. I looked at the check. Stunned. It was for $260,000. We're also setting up a trust, Hannah continued, to cover all your expenses here, to give you back financial independence, and to fund improvements for other residents. Dr. Morrison helped us understand that this isn't just about our family, Lily added. It's about all the forgotten parents here. I stared at the check, at their faces, at the schedule they'd carefully written out. These gestures were significant, but something was still missing. This is all very generous, I said carefully. But you still don't understand the most important thing. They looked confused. Money isn't what I wanted from you. Time isn't what I wanted. Even respect isn't enough. Then what? Hannah asked. I wanted to matter to you, not as an obligation or a problem to solve, but as a person you genuinely wanted in your lives. The room was silent for a long moment. Then Lily stood up, walked around the table, and hugged me fiercely. You do matter, Mom. You matter more than anything. Daniel joined her, wrapping his arms around both of us. We're sorry, Mom. We're so sorry. Hannah held back for a moment, and then she too joined our embrace. I love you, Mom. We all love you. We just forgot how to show it. Standing there in that renovated room, holding my children for the first time in months, I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness that would take time. Not trust that would take even longer. But possibility. The possibility that we could rebuild something from the ashes of what we'd lost. When we separated, I carefully placed the check on the table. Keep your money, I said. I don't need it. Their faces fell. But, I continued, I will accept your time. I will accept your effort, and I will give you the chance to prove that this change is real. What do you need from us? Daniel asked. I need you to understand that this isn't about punishment anymore. The visiting restrictions will be lifted for your family, effective immediately. Relief flooded their faces, but I held up a hand. There are conditions. They waited. First, when you visit, you're here for me, not on your phones, not dealing with work crises, not distracted by other commitments. They nodded. Second, you learn to see this place as more than just where your mother lives. You get to know other residents. You volunteer for activities. You treat the staff with respect and recognition. Of course, Hannah said. Third, and most importantly, you remember that love is a verb, not just a feeling. You show up even when it's inconvenient. You stay even when it's boring. You make time for me not because you have to, but because you want to. We will, Lily promised. We absolutely will. I looked at each of them, these children I'd raised, these people who had hurt me so deeply and were now working so hard to heal those wounds. There's something else you need to know, I said. They looked concerned. Catherine's letter, the one she left encouraging me to get revenge. They nodded warily. That wasn't the only letter she left me. I pulled an envelope from my purse. It was sealed, addressed simply to my stubborn niece and nephew. She asked me to give this to you only if you showed genuine remorse and effort to change. Hannah reached for it with shaking hands. She opened it carefully and read silently, her expression changing from concern to shock to something approaching awe. What does it say? Daniel asked. Hannah looked up, tears streaming down her face. She forgave us, and she left each of us something. What yet? Her forgiveness wasn't conditional on us earning it. It was given freely with hope that we would one day deserve it. Lily took the letter, reading quickly. Oh my God. Mom, she left us her journals. All of them, going back 40 years. Daniel read over her shoulder. And she left a trust for our kids for college with the stipulation that they have to volunteer at places like this. They stared at the letter in amazement. She knew, Hannah whispered. She knew we would eventually come around. Catherine always was the optimist in the family, I said. She believed people could change if given the right motivation. Hannah folded the letter carefully. She thanked you, Mom. She thanked you for taking the hard path, for forcing us to confront what we'd become. The letter made its way around the table, each of them reading it again, absorbing the forgiveness and challenge from their beloved aunt. There's one more thing, Daniel said after a long moment. Dr. Morrison asked us to invite you to join us for family counseling. We want to do this right, Hannah explained. We want professional help rebuilding our relationship. Will you come? I considered this. Family therapy was something we'd never done, even during the worst times. It represented a level of vulnerability and commitment that none of us had been willing to embrace before. Yes, I said finally. I'll come. The relief on their faces was palpable. So what happens now? Lily asked. I stood, smoothing my dress. Now you go home, and on Friday, you come back for our first family dinner together. 700 here in the dining room. Yes? You'll meet some of the other residents. See what life is really like in this place. They agreed readily, gathering their things with an energy I hadn't seen from them in years. As they prepared to leave, Hannah turned back to me. Mom, can I ask you something? Of course. Are you happy here, really? I considered the question. A month ago, the answer would have been an unequivocal no. But now, looking around at the improvements we'd made, thinking about the staff who felt valued, the residents who were thriving. I'm learning to be, I said. This place is becoming what it should have been all along, a place where people live with dignity in their final years. But what about your own life, your own happiness? I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in months. My own happiness, it turns out, is tied to making other people's lives better. Who would have thought? 6 months later, I stood in the garden of Sunny Meadows, now a vibrant space filled with flowers, comfortable seating, and a small fountain. The sounds of laughter drifted through the open doors of the activity room, where Daniel was teaching a group of residents how to use tablets to video chat with their families. Inside, Hannah was conducting a free legal clinic, helping residents update their wills and advance directives. Lily had organized a cooking class in the newly renovated kitchen, where her famous apple pie was filling the halls with a delicious aroma. The transformation of Sunny Meadows was complete, but more remarkable was the transformation in my family. True to their word, my children had become fixtures at the facility. They didn't just visit me, they had become part of the community. Their children, my grandchildren, now came regularly. bringing joy to not just me, but to all the residents who missed their own families. Nancy appeared beside me, clipboard in hand. "Mrs. Mitchell, the reporter from the Senior Living Journal is here for the interview." I nodded. "I'll be right there." The Journal wanted to do a feature on our revolutionary approach to family engagement. The visiting policy that had started as a way to force my own children to see me had evolved into a comprehensive program that was helping families reconnect all across the facility. Other nursing homes were beginning to take notice, sending administrators to observe our methods. We'd even started a training program for staff from other facilities, teaching them how to implement similar policies and programs. As I turned to go inside, I saw Harold sitting with his daughter, both of them laughing at something on her phone. Margaret was surrounded by her family. 3 generations gathered around her as she told stories of her youth. These weren't occasional, obligatory visits. These were genuine connections, facilitated by a system that valued relationship over convenience. I found Daniel waiting for me by the entrance. "Ready, Mom. This reporter is going to make you a star." I laughed. "Hardly. I'm just an old woman who got tired of being ignored." "You're a lot more than that," he said, taking my arm. "You're changing how people think about aging and family responsibility." The interview went well. I explained our philosophy, our programs, the results we'd seen. The reporter seemed genuinely impressed, especially when I showed her the data on improved health outcomes associated with increased family engagement. "Mrs. Mitchell," she asked as we wrapped up, "what would you say to other elderly parents who feel forgotten by their busy children?" I thought for a moment. I'd tell them that everyone has value, regardless of age. I'd tell them that sometimes love needs to be taught, even to those who should know better. And I'd tell them that it's never too late to demand the respect and care you deserve. After the reporter left, I joined my family in the dining room for our weekly dinner. This had become a tradition, not just for us, but for many families at Sunny Meadows. "Mom," Hannah said as we ate, "I've been thinking about expanding the legal clinic to the other 2 facilities in the network." "That's a wonderful idea," I said. "The need is certainly there." Daniel nodded enthusiastically. "And I've been talking with Nancy about setting up a transportation program. Many families claim they don't visit because it's too far to drive. So what if we provided a shuttle service? We could fund it through the foundation," Lily suggested. "We've already received several donations from families who've seen improvements in their loved ones." I looked around the table at my children, now so invested in the work I'd started. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about changing a system that had failed so many elderly people and their families. "You know," I said, "when I bought this place, all I wanted was to force you to visit me. I never imagined it would turn into something this meaningful." Hannah reached for my hand. "Mom, you didn't just change us. You're changing how people think about elder care." "We're thinking of writing a book together," Daniel said, "about our experience, about how we went from being those neglectful children to understanding what really matters." "With your permission, of course," Lily added. I felt tears welling in my eyes. I think that's a wonderful idea. Later that evening, as my family prepared to leave, I walked them to the parking lot, the same parking lot where they had abandoned me all those months ago. Now, their departures were different, filled with hugs, promises to return, genuine reluctance to leave. As I watched their cars drive away, I felt a presence beside me. "You did it," Nancy said softly. "You really did it." "Did what?" "You made them see, not just your family, but all of them. You made them understand what their parents need." I smiled. "Not all of them. Nancy, there are still too many Harolds and Margarets out there, waiting by windows for children who rarely come. But it's a start," she said, "and starts can lead to big changes." I nodded, looking up at the stars appearing in the evening sky. "Catherine would be proud," I said. She always believed I was stronger than I knew. She was right. As I turned to go back inside, I paused for one last look at the parking lot, now empty of my family's cars but full of the promise of their return. The journey from abandoned mother to pioneering advocate had been unexpected, but standing there in the cool evening air, I felt a sense of purpose and fulfillment I'd never imagined possible at 73. I had started with a simple desire to matter to my children again. I'd ended up creating something that mattered to hundreds of people I'd never met. I thought of all the families who would visit this weekend, all the conversations that would happen, all the connections that would be strengthened because I'd decided to push back against being forgotten. It wasn't just about visiting ours anymore. It was about changing how we value our elderly, how we honor the people who raised us, how we recognize the ongoing contributions they make to our lives. As I walked back inside, greeted warmly by residents and staff alike, I knew that the true transformation wasn't in the facility I'd purchased. It was in the hearts of the people I'd touched, including my own. And that was worth every penny of Catherine's $7 million. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever had to take drastic measures to make your family appreciate you? Comment below and let me know your thoughts. And if you enjoyed my story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Right on your screen, you'll find 2 more stories that might interest you. Until next time, this is Karen Mitchell, reminding you that it's never too late to demand the respect you deserve.